Nangasya vamaso rajrishe esha samstata tummarati amogaviryahi nripa vamseyasmin keshavashrayaha. The sages decided that the descendants of the family of the saintly king Anga should not be stopped. For in this family, the semen was very powerful, and the children were prone to become devotees of the Lord. So, how did we arrive to this part that King Anga was without a son, because of which he was unhappy, but more so, the sages mentioned that the demigods were not accepting his oblations because he was contaminated by the sin of not having a son. So, with the agreement of the king and his wife Sunita, the sages performed a sacrifice by which a personality appeared in the fire of the yajna, carrying the payasam, which the king, after consideration, gave it to his wife. So the word after consideration is used to indicate the sage was King Anga was aware of the impious nature of his wife. Now, it doesn't say that she did impious activities. At least not in the Bhagavatam. I'm not sure there are Puranic stories about it. But just the fact that she was the daughter of Mrityu, and Mrityu, he's the demigod of death, deals with misery, agony, lamentation, cruelty. So she had inherited, and Prabhupada makes this point that the daughters tend to inherit the nature of the father, and the sons tend to inherit the nature of the mother. So Sunita inherited the nature of her father Mrityu, and Vena inherited the nature of his mother Sunita. So Anga, after consideration that his wife may not be the perfect candidate, decided to give the payasam. I see this thing that is moving for both Prema Manjari and Nanda Prabhu. Prema Manjari, are you able to hear me? Because it keeps saying that is connecting to audio. Nanda Prabhu, can you hear?
I don't think they can hear you, bro.
Is there anything that we can do at our end?
Maybe Prem Kishore Prabhu has to allow them in the. I don't know if it's like that.
Oh, I think that's good. Nanda Prabhu, can you hear? Let's check with Varshana. Varshana, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu, I can hear you.
Okay. Saranga Prabhu can hear.
I think Nanda Prabhu is online now.
Nanda Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu, I can hear you.
Were you just able to hear me? Because your status was for a while saying connecting to audio.
I have been hearing you, but I could not speak. I have some clients here, so I could not speak. That's why I could not respond.
Oh, okay. So what do these three dots mean? This, like if you look at Prem Manjari's screen, there are three dots that are waving. What does that mean?
I don't see that there is usually an icon of microphone. I don't see that in against her name.
Right.
That more,
Prem Kishore Prabhu is saying any issues.
Prem Manjari Mataji could not connect the audio, I guess, because there is no audio showing in her.
So do you think that she's waiting to be let in? Is that what's going on?
Possible,
Did you wait for a while before you were let in?
Yes, that's right.
Maybe
I was waiting for a while.
Okay. Maybe she has something else going on. So we were doing a quick recap, and the sages, they approached. So by taking that payasam, Sunita gave birth to Vena, and Vena by nature was crooked. So he created a lot of disturbances. Stopped the worship, stopped yajna, say everybody should worship him. The sages then approached him and said, please desist, and he insulted the sages. So the sages killed him by high-sounding words, by Vedic hymns. And his mother, Sunita, by the application of ingredients and by chanting of mantras, preserved his body. Now, after he died, because there was a lack of strong authority, the thieves and the rogues that had gone into hiding now emerged. And Maitreya said everybody became a thief. So they were all robbing each other. Smaller thieves were being robbed by bigger thieves. And when the opportunity arose, the bigger thieves were being robbed by even bigger thieves. So everybody became a thief. And the sages, when they looked at it, they felt bad for people in general, and they wanted to rectify it. And then we had this discussion about when is it, when is interference required, and when is it not required? The sins of omission and commission. That earlier on, the sages, they personally killed King Vena, even though the Brahmanas are not supposed to do that. But now when they saw that these bandits were coming, they did not consider it appropriate for them to interfere again. So, being very intelligent, they came up with another solution. And then this is what their thought was, that they decided to continue the dynasty of the saintly king Anga. So in 5 verses, we will see how they do that. Now, behind this decision is a thought process between nature and nurture. So each one of us is born with an intrinsic nature. We can, in modern science, we can call it genetics, that we come with certain qualities, and nurture is the environment that we grow in. So because the combination of nature and nurture is very powerful, we see what seems to be almost rites of passage by birth, that the son of a king ascends the throne. In the Mahabharata, it is mentioned that in earlier times, it was not because they were sons of the king, but simply because they were most qualified, because of a combination of nature and nurture, that they inherited the qualities of whatever it took to rule from their parents. And because they grew in an environment where right from the beginning, they were being trained and they were observing. So the powerful combination of nature and nurture made them most qualified. But in Mahabharata said there are examples when that did not happen. The classic example is in the case of Nanda Baba. He was not the eldest son. The eldest was, I believe, Upananda. And when he was asked to take over the position of being the head of the cowherd clans, he declined. And he said, actually, Nanda is more qualified than I am, which he was, and everybody agreed to that. So the sages here, they're considering that the inherited qualities of the descendants of Swayambhavu Manu and Dhruva Maharaj is a powerful motivation to continue the dynasty coming through King Anga. They're also seeing that they could prevent the destruction of their own austerity by killing the thieves and protecting the populations. Because even though they had the ability to destroy the thieves, but for a Brahman to curse, Brahman to perform acts like killing, it takes the Brahma Tej away from them. So they wanted to preserve their austerity. We see that in the case of Vishwamitra and Ramayana. And at one point we see Vishwamitra is powerful enough to create another universe. He's almost at the level of Brahma. That when Trishanku was not allowed to enter the Swarg, he said, don't worry, I'll create another Swarg for you. And he did. He started creating planets, and he started doing through the mantra, according to certain Puranas, he's also started creating species. So he was that powerful. So he could have definitely annihilated Tataka and Subahu and Marich, but he did not want to drain his austerity, his Brahma Tejas. It was not his duty. He told Dasharatha, it's your duty to do that. So at this point, the sages, they are taking this deliberate position that it's not our place to be Kshatriyas, but it's our place to create an environment wherein the people are protected. So the dynasty of Swayambhavu Manu and Dhruva Maharaj was famous for righteousness and for taking shelter of Krishna. Now, does that mean that being a devotee is an inherited quality? The answer again is yes and no. So we know from the Bhagavad Gita, how does the process of reincarnation work? That a soul based on what it desires and what it deserves is attracted to a corresponding womb. Souls that are demoniac in nature and very sinful are attracted to the wombs of demoniac parents. And souls that are devotees are attracted to the womb of devotees. And Krishna says so himself, that he makes arrangements for devotees to be born in the house of devotee parents. So yes, the statement is it's true and validated also. We see the lineage coming from Lord Brahma to Swayambhavu Manu to Utanpad, Dhruva, then his descendants, all very, very powerful and righteous. In the case of Vena, the semen was contaminated by the influence of Sunita. Vishwanath says, Chakravarti Thakur says that just as water will become dirty when passed through a dirty filter. So where do we see examples of this? We see that in the Mahabharata, that both Dhritarashtra and Vidur were born from the semen of Vyas, but from different mothers. And because of that, so even though, taking that analogy, the purity of the water was the same in both the cases. But Amba's frame of mind was very contaminated. Not Amba, Ambika. Her frame of mind was very contaminated at the time. Whereas in the case of Vidur, his mother, it doesn't say so much about her antecedents, but it does say that she approached Vyas in a very devotional mood, in a very mode of goodness mood. And so Vidur was born. And there are exceptions to this also, as in the case of Prahlad Maharaj. In the case of Prahlad Maharaj, his father was a demon, Hiranyakashipu. Mother was not particularly a strong devotee, Kayadu. But what was compensating in this case? Nurture. So the nature may have been contaminated, but he grew up under the shelter of Narad Muni. Grew up in the sense that he was still in the womb, but he spent 36,000 years associating with the Vani of Narad Muni. That made all the difference. Srila Prabhupada mentions that purity is maintained not by simply appearing in the lineages, but by also observing the proper samskars like Garbhadhan samskar. So Prabhupada is making the point of nature and nurture. So the samskars becomes part of nurture. Samskars are activities that are done to create strong, subtle impressions. And then as far as conception is concerned, it begins with Garbhada samskar, and Garbhada samskar creates a spiritually charged environment which attracts a devotee. So Prabhupada says that Anga was very pure because of the purification of semen in the family of Maharaj Dhruva. However, his semen was contaminated in association with his wife Sunita. Because of this polluted semen, King Vena was produced. This was a catastrophe in the family of Dhruva Maharaj. All the saintly persons and sages considered this point, and they decided to take action in this matter as described in the following verses. Let's see what is the action they take. Verse 43. Vinishchityevam rishyo vipannasya mahipate mamantururum tarasa tatrasid bahukunara. After making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Vena's body. So the fact that one body appeared out of another is not astonishing. This happens even in the process of conception. That the semen is a part of the body and the womb is the part of a body. And by the combination of the two, another body is produced. So it's happening on an ongoing basis. It's called ongoing creation, nitya. So the sages use the similar principle. So it's not that they whimsically churned the thighs of the dead king hoping for something to happen, but it says that tarasa means specific process given in the Vedas, chanting of mantras, proper ingredients. They followed a specific process that allows for the creation of one body from another. And in contemporary times, we see that also happening. It's called cloning. That they take a part of, like they cloned a lamb. They took some cells from one lamb, and they created another lamb out of it. Right? So even now we see that has been happening. I think it's been banned for ethical reasons, but I believe they still do it for medical purposes. So they followed this process. They created another body, and because the other body was created from the previous one, the body inherited the qualities. Now, the soul of Vena had already left the body, so the body was simply matter. It was gross matter, dead matter. But because the matter was still preserved, it had not disintegrated, the sages were able to extract the appropriate ingredients from that matter, use it as a vessel for another soul to occupy it. So it's not that the new personality that was created was King Vena, or that there was a soul that was lingering in the body. This is simply a mechanical process. King Vena had died, the soul had left, but his body, with its intrinsic nature, or the three modes that it was made of, was still there, and the sages basically extracted that, and just like when conception happens, a soul is attracted to a body. Same way, a particular soul, based on its own desires and karma, was attracted to this body. So Srila Prabhupada says that by a certain process, when the thighs of the dead body were churned, another body came out. Although dead, the body of King Vena was preserved by drugs and by mantras chanted by King Vena's mother. In this way, the ingredients for the production of another body was, Prabhupada says, the ingredients for the productions. It's just the material ingredients. When the body of the person named Bahuk came out of the dead body of King Vena, it was really not very astonishing. It was simply a question of knowing how to do it. And then Prabhupada says, just like from the semen of one body, another body is produced, and the life symptoms are visible due to the souls taking shelter of this body. one should not think that it was impossible for another body to come out of the dead body of Maharaj Venu. This was performed by the skillful action of the sages. Verse 44. Kako Krishna Trishmango Risvabahur Mahahanu Risvapanim Nanasargo Raktakshastam Ramurdjaha. This person born from King Venu's thigh was named Bahuk, and his complexion was as black as a crow's. All the limbs of his body were very short, and his arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper colored. There's a physical description of the personality that appeared. Verse 45. Tam tu tevan tam dinam kim karumi tivadinam nishdetya bruvam stata sa nishadas tato bhava. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth, he bowed down and inquired, "Sirs, what shall I do?" The great sages replied, "Please sit down." Nishad. Thus, Nishad, the father of the Naishad race, was born. So, since he was primitive in nature, he was not suitable to be the king. And the Naishads are a race of forest dwellers, and they essentially live outside the Vedic system. Prabhupada said that it is said in the Shastras that the head of the body represents the Brahmanas, the arms the Kshatriyas, the abdomen represents the Vaishyas, and the legs, beginning with the thighs, represent the Shudras. The Shudras are also sometimes called black or Krishna. The Brahmanas are called Shukla or white, and the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are a mixture of black and white. However, those who are extraordinarily white are said to have skins produced out of white leprosy. It may be concluded that the white or the golden hue is the color of higher caste and black is the complexion of the Shudras. Verse 46. Tasya vamasyāstu naishāda girikāna gocharaha yena hara jayamano vena kalmasham ulbanam. After his Nishad's birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant action of King Vena's sinful activities. As such, this Naishad class are always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering, and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. So this verse is a little mystical. And to be honest with you, I'm not able to fully reconcile it, because we know that when the soul goes, it travels with the subtle body. And the subtle body carries with it the pious and the sinful reactions. So when the soul of King Vena had left the body, then one can understand that the soul carried with it its own resultant activities. Here it is said that the sinful activities of King Vena stayed back, and it was taken over by the Nishads. So this is not how generally karma works. But we have also seen instances where personalities are able to distribute their pious and impious reactions. So does anybody remember a past time in which a personality is able to distribute impious reactions?
King Indra.
Do you remember the past time?
Series of things. I think first he disrespected his guru Brihaspati, I think, and then one after the other, and he killed. Was it the Vritrasura pastime after killing of Vritrasura?
Well, it's the Vritrasura pastime, but it actually happens before the killing of Vritrasura, because Vritrasura was killed because Vritrasura was appeared because Indra killed what was the name of the Brahman? He had 3 heads, and he was the priest for the Devas, because Brihaspati had left when Indra had insulted him. And then he found out that the priest with one of the heads was offering oblations to the ancestors on his mother's side. And then he got upset and killed. And then he was contaminated by the sin of killing a Brahman. So then in order to distribute that sin, he actually gave it to 4 places. He gave it to women, he gave it to trees, he gave it to land, and he gave it to water. And they took it as a service because it was important for Indra to be able to rule and for him to be free of contamination. And because of them taking the sin, each of them suffered or do suffer some reaction. So there is precedence where sinful reactions can be distributed. Just like pious activities, we know that by benedictions, the results of pious activities are distributed. If somebody has performed a lot of pious activities, they get the power to benedict. Right? If you and I, if I go and somewhere to somebody and say that may you become a king, very unlikely the person will become a king. But when somebody like Vishwamitra says that may you become a king, the person becomes a king because he has the requisite piety. And essentially benediction is transfer of piety. That just like cursing, benediction is also transfer of piety. In Ramayana, it's said that when Vishwamitra had blessed Shanku, because Trishanku was so sinful, in order to negate that sin, he exhausted all his piety. And after that, then he went to, I believe, to Pushkar. He went to Pushkar to perform austerities. And Vishwamitra, of course, was powerful in that way, that he could perform austerities for 60,000 years or something like that. And then he regained his tejas. So this is how we can understand it. It's not that the sins stay back with the body, but because of the activities of the sages, they were able to take that and give it to this personality. One might say it's unfair to the Nishad. Is it their fault that Vena was sinful? Is it their fault that the sages wanted to purify? So why should Nishad suffer from it? But we know that only a soul that is attracted to that nature would occupy that body. So it's not that somebody was forcibly given that body and forcibly given their sinful reactions, but it's the nature of certain souls that they're attracted. That's how demoniac people have demoniac descendants, because there are souls that are attracted to those kinds of activities. So in this way, the Nishad race was formed. In Mahabharata, we see that So does anybody remember who is a famous Nishad in Mahabharata?
Guha?
Say that again?
Guha. Guha.
Guha is not a Nishad. He's a boatman. I forget the name.
That's
Maybe you're
okay.
right. Maybe he was a
Is it
Nishad.
Ekalavya, Prabhu?
Yeah. The one that I had in mind was Iklavya,
Ah,
famous Nishad, and he approached Dronacharya to learn the science of fighting, and Dronacharya refused. And sometimes it is said that Dronacharya refused because he felt that Eklavya would be a competitor to Arjun. But actually, Acharya says no. Dronacharya was a liberated Brahman. And how do we know that? Because when Drishtadyumna approached Dronacharya, Dronacharya was aware that Drishtadyumna had appeared for the purpose of killing him. Now, in another, if Dronacharya was anything but liberated, he would have either refused to teach Drishtadyumna or he would have taught him wrong things. He would have taught him wrong mantras that if you do this and this will happen, which would basically give him some kind of protection. But no, he taught him as if he was his perfect student. So the reason he didn't instruct Eklavya was he did not want to give the sword in the hand of a monkey. That when powerful personalities, when powerful capabilities are given to personalities who do not have the qualifications to handle it, then they cause more damage to others. And we see that in the case of Eklavya, that even Dronacharya refused to give him knowledge, he stole the knowledge. He would secretly observe Dronacharya teaching Arjuna and then practice. So he stole the knowledge. And later on, of course, we know he was killed by Krishna. So the tribe that Prabhupada said descends from these are addicted to sinful activities. Prabhupada says the Naishadas are not allowed to live in the cities and towns because they are sinful by nature. Sometimes they're known as kirats. So Varshana, you are right, because actually the boatman is, the name that I was trying to get was Kirat. The boatman is actually the Kirat, which is, Prabhupada says here, is synonymous to Naishad. But of course, he appears in Ramayana. Engagement in the transcendental loving devotional service of the Lord can make anyone, however sinful he may be, fit to return home back to Godhead. The Prabhupada says that one should not get too much burdened down by all this. That Nishad or Kair Kirat or Brahman or whatever. Prabhupada says simply, the process of devotional service purifies one from all contamination. Sarvada, Sarvatra. This is the end of the 14th chapter. I'll summarize it quickly and then pause for discussion. So this chapter is titled The Story of King Vena. It begins with the atrocities of Vena. Then we see that the concerned sages plan to meet with Vena and pacify him. They try to pacify him using Samdan Bhed Dand, or Samdan Bhed. But Vena is arrogant and he chastises the sages, calls them as unchaste wives, demands that they worship him. So the sages kill Vena. And his mother Sunita preserves his dead body with herbs and mantras. The sages then observe the disturbances in the kingdom. So they take the body of King Vena and they churn the thigh and produce Bahuka, who is also known as Nishad, from which the tribal Nishadas descend. So we'll pause over here and have some discussion on what we have read so far.
Prabhu, I have two questions. One was, you said that Sunita inherited the nature of her father, Mrityu. So Mrityu, it says death personified in the purporter. So is Mrityu Yamaraj or no?
Mrityu is not Yamaraj. So
Okay.
my understanding is that Yamaraj is the Lord of Justice.
Okay.
He takes care of executing the law of karma, punishing people, etc. Mrityu is the demigod that actually brings about death. So there's this the difference between what they do.
Okay. Yeah, that explains it, because Yamaraj is one of the Bhagavatas, right? So Prabhu, the other thing was that purport that you read about Bahuka. I was thinking, in the current day context of racism and everything, that purport would sound quite inappropriate, right? Like here it says upper, like the Brahmanas are Shukla or white, and they are of the higher caste, and black is the complexion of the Shudras. And so anyway, I just wanted to hear from you how to understand that purport. And also, there is always this thing about how we are so fascinated with the lighter complexion and that sort of a thing. It alludes to that.
It does allude to that. When I was reading the purport, my thoughts were the same as yours. At different points in Srila Prabhupada's purport, there are things that are said that were probably politically not most acceptable, even at the time when he wrote it, in the 60s and 70s. His discussion about women, position of women, it's no mystery that there is a lot of discussion with respect to what he said. This is not that prominent, but if you listen there, there are lectures in which Prabhupada, this is of course in a purport, there are lectures in which Prabhupada makes the same point. And actually he says something very similar to what you say, that people are attracted to white qualities, to fairer skin, because such people tend to be more Brahminical. Parents prefer to have fairer complexion child. And, being fair is considered to be the more goodness quality. I myself do not have a way to reconcile it, because yes, the statement does appear racist, saying that people with a fair skin are superior to people with a dark skin. I asked this question once in a class, and probably not an appropriate setting to ask, but I did ask the question once in the class, and the sannyasi who was giving the class said that Krishna is dark, so don't worry about it. So he didn't want to go into details. That was what his answer was. Having said that, we are obviously all mature practicing devotees. I'd love to hear from you. What is your take on this? Have you heard anybody trying to reconcile it, or trying to, like, there have been essays written or comments made about the position of women. That when Srila Prabhupada talks about the position of a woman in a seemingly derogatory manner, there are rationalizations that have been written to kind of frame it in a more palatable context. Has anybody come across something like that for this particular characterization?
Just one time, Prabhu, I heard, I think it was a discussion between Srila Prabhupada and a mayor. He was a black person. And then he told him that we pray to Krishna, who is also black, something like that.
I see.
Yeah, and yeah, that's when I heard, and not necessarily a lot of comment on that. But Krishna is not black. Krishna is dark blue, or like the cloud. One more black, but not black. It's like,
That's true.
But anyway.
We hear Draupadi is black, right? She's called Krishna as well. And she was considered very beautiful. Now, I don't know what beauty this is talking about and that one. Yeah, it's a little disturbing, this purport.
It is. And as I said, this is not the only place. Like, there are other places. And Prabhupada is not shy about it. If you look at, if you search enough, you'll see his lectures also there. Draupadi was dark-skinned. Krishna was, of course, dark-skinned. Uddhav was dark-skinned. So great personalities themselves. Now, Krishna, you can say, is God. So he can, whether he has whatever skin color he has, he's God. But Draupadi is not God. And she was considered to be a great beauty. And Uddhav was famous for his beauty. So, so there is that that's going on. From an empirical perspective, what Prabhupada says, we cannot deny it. So in India, definitely, there is a strong preference for pale color, especially amongst girls. And worldwide also, you see that people with fairer skins tend to discriminate against people with darker skins. So even though it is considered to be politically inappropriate to acknowledge it, but yet it is going on. So it's not that what Prabhupada is saying is not there. It is there. But what Prabhupada is doing is that he is endorsing it to some extent. He's saying, yes, that's why I think, Varshana, you're saying that is disturbing, and I hear you. Yes. Go ahead,
So, Prabhu, these are some of those aspects in the scriptures where, in the current context, like even the Varna system is always not easy to explain to somebody who doesn't have the deeper understanding of how that is more for professional harmony and not for discrimination. So similarly, here those are like some, Krishna himself created the Varna system, but here maybe not directly, but these are like the way things are. But the way it is now kind of misconstrued, or the current context, just reading this purport can be disturbing, like how we, if you just see that, and today's context with so much discrimination, it can be taken out of context. But the fact remains the same. Like in here, even I had challenge, but because I may not know, but you mentioned these that the sins were distributed to four of them accepted it, Indra's sin. Now, if you take that also, now it is a fact. Now there is a way, like women are created with that. They have to do that. They have to go through that. Now it's if you see it out of context, discrimination, but whom do you blame? There is nobody to blame. It is just the way it has been, like Srishti or whatever. Okay. So I'm trying to understand it something like that. This is how it is, and with a deeper understanding of a broader context of background, we can accept it, but not maybe highlight it, because somebody would know not similar understanding easily will get into slippery slope in terms of discussing or that's my thoughts on that.
Valid thoughts. Thank you for sharing.
In the modern context, it's also, there are white supremacists, Ku Klux Klan, all these still exist. It's not that it's not, it does exist. And Prabhupada is stating the facts without any, as you said, without shying away from it. And that's one of the things that some people who wants to put down the whole Krishna consciousness, they take these things as a means to bring down. Prabhupada is a racist, is a gender biased person, and all kinds of things. There are some propagandas in the YouTube. If you go and we can see those things, and it's a way. I'm thinking it's a way that Maya is trying to protect the people who are able to cross over this barrier to protect them from the other people who can still be talking about all this discrimination and all these things and stay in that platform only, will never be able to cross over that barrier. But those who can cross over the barrier ultimately see Prabhupada as a person who has no discrimination at all. He has every color in his movement, the many the women in the movement. So the thing is, this is my understanding of Prabhupada. Prabhupada did not shy away because he knows those who will want to make progress will make progress beyond these barriers. And the same thing about the moon being farther than the sun, and the astronomical discrepancies that Prabhupada explains without any shying away, without any hiding the facts or anything. From the Vedic perspective, he just gives, that is a fact. If you accept, you make progress. If you don't accept, you stay where you are. That's all. So that is my take on this, Prabhu.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the points you made. I think what you're saying is, and Prabhupada would say that accepting Vedas as an absolute is a critical part of making progress. And he would give the example of the cow dung and conch. That the Vedas say that stool is impure, but cow dung is pure. That bones are impure, but conch is pure. So you can either try and rationalize it, or you can accept it. And accepting it is the way to make progress. So perhaps that's what Prabhupada is also putting forth, that this is what the Vedas say, and if you accept it, you are more qualified to make progress. So good. I think this helped me also. It gives me some perspectives. I think the discussion is useful. Somebody has any other points they'd like to add?
I just want to add something. Prabhupada said, preach boldly. You preach according to the Shastra, and sometimes if you want to twist it, then maybe it can backfire. Better to preach boldly as it is said, as Prabhupada said, no, as it is.
Yes. Yes. So it's a display of your own conviction. Okay. Okay. My wife wants to make a comment on the women part.
Haribol. Yeah, I asked
Correct.
this question of Narayani Mataji that because women get very troubled by these statements of Prabhupada about women, and Narayani Mataji had a very nice answer. She said that it's not that Prabhupada was discriminating or denigrating the status of women. What he was trying to say is that by using the word that women are the words that he was using, he meant to say that women are actually very simple-hearted, and because they're very simple-hearted, they tend to get fooled very quickly, and that is the reason men tend to take advantage, and they can be used in many wrong ways, and they tend to fall for all the all the false praises that men will throw on them, and that is why they are basically what Prabhupada was trying to say, that they are, because they're so silly, so simple-hearted, so stupid, so they're considered fools. It's not that they are low class, but it's just that they are very simple-hearted and fools. So I kind of and because she was saying, look at the current society, how women are being exploited, especially in the workplaces, and then in the environments where they are mixing with the opposite gender, and they fall for all the false praises and this and that, and then they are the opposite sex tends to take advantage, and that is the reason why Prabhupada say that women are fools. So, I know.
Okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
Somebody has something else to add?
I was just going to add, Prabhu, that what Mataji said was really wonderful, nicely put. We also know that how women are being fooled with the help of money. Like when you give money, and if you see Bollywood movies or anything, the men are dancing with a full suit, whereas the woman with the half-naked body in the Himalayas in a snow mountain. Why would they do that? It's very unfortunate. But in the name of women's liberation, they are being cheated like that. So I'm just giving an example. What Mataji said is correct.
Yeah. Prabhupada will make this point that the whole woman's lib movement, because at that time it was in the vogue. He said that was the ultimate cheating of women. That initially, they were taking care of the children and the house, and the husband took care of, or the men took care of protecting them and earning the money, taking care of the material needs. And then went to the woman and said that now you're liberated, so you go out and you also take care of getting money, working out there. And by the way, you still have to take care of everything else. And then because you're liberated, we are also not obliged to continue in a long-term perspective to give you protection. So even statistically, it is shown, and this is in America, not in India, that 80% of the women who work still do the majority of the work at house. They still do the cooking, they still take care of the kids. So it's not they swap one thing for another. They essentially added something, and it was added in the name of women's liberation. So I work in an environment that is it's a surcharge environment. There's a lot of it's a diverse environment, and there is so much of harassment that is done. So I look at it and then I think that it's at work, they're they're harassed in different ways, sometimes gross, sometimes subtle. At home, they go and take care of, they execute more than their fair share of work. If it is 50-50, then the husband should do at least 50% of the work, but very rarely are there. It's just fortunate that Krishna has made women to be a lot stronger, and that's why they're able to sustain it. But it is as Prabhupada says, that it is a symptom of the unfairness of this current day and age. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you, Varshana. I appreciate you bringing up these points, and I personally learned a lot from the discussion. So I won't claim that I have the answer to it, but at least I have perspectives to it. And I hope so do you. So we'll move on to the 15th chapter. So 15th chapter is titled King Prithu's Appearance and Coronation. And this essentially describes the birth of Prithu and Archi from the body of King Vena. And this is essentially a very small chapter. It's just got 26 verses. And I would say the majority of the verses do not have purports. They're narratives there. So I'm expecting that with the time that we have today and Wednesday, we should certainly be able to complete the chapter, and maybe also start the next chapter. This also brings us to the half point of the fourth canto. Fourth canto is 31 verses. And even though we are at the beginning of the 15th chapter, by the time we ended, we are at the half point. And from the Bhakti Vaibhava module study perspective, this appears as the beginning of module 7. So there are 10 modules. So this is the beginning of the 7th module, which indicates that we are 70% done, 30% remaining. Just to give us a perspective of our progress. So the chapter is divided in essentially 3 parts. Begins with the appearance of Prithu and Archi, then the coronation of King Prithu, then the glorification of King Prithu and Prithu's reaction to it. I think the last 7 verses are probably the ones that have some substantive purports. Others are mostly narrations. Verse 1. Maitre uvacha atatasya punarvipre aputrasya mahipate bahubhyan madhyamanabhyam mithunam sampadayata. The great sage Maitre continued, my dear Vidur, thus the Brahmanas and the great sages again churned the 2 arms of King Vena's dead body. As a result, a male and a female couple came out of his arms. So the first 10 verses describe the appearance of Prithu and Archi. So we had discussed that the lineage of King Vena and the coming from Swayambhavu Manu and Dhruv Maharaj and King Anga, and the power of the sacrifice produced this result. Now, this is again one of those examples that's a little difficult to understand because Prithu and Archi, they were born from the body of Vena. They could be considered as siblings, but they married. Actually speaking, they're not considered as siblings because of the mystical nature of their appearance. Does anybody know other examples where there is a similar kind of a situation where from one perspective they're considered as siblings, but then they ended up marrying each other?
Swayambhuva, Manu and Shatarupa.
They both appeared from the body of Brahma. And there also, that point is clearly made that they cannot be considered as siblings because of the mystical nature of their appearance. Actually, they said they appeared through the body of Brahma. Same thing is also said here, but is also understood here, but they did not appear from the body of Brahma, but through the body of Brahma. Does anybody remember another situation? We did it in this canto only. I would say in the 5th or 6th chapter. So when we were talking about the lineage of Swayambhuva Manu, then we spoke about Akuti and Prajapati Ruchi. So Akuti is the daughter of Manu, and she married Prajapati Ruchi. And they had a son and a daughter named Yagya and Dakshina. And Yagya married Dakshina. So they are born from the same parents. But there also it is said that Yagya is the personality of Godhead and Dakshina is the expansion of Lakshmi Devi. So these personalities, they do not comply with conventional understanding. Now, on the other hand, when we were talking about the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, it starts with the lineage of Adharma. And there it is said that it is shown how repeatedly the siblings marry each other. And Prabhupada says that kind of incest is the origin of sin. So more than just the external activity, it helps to look at the context over here. The commentators, when they comment on this verse, they also talk about the metaphor behind the churning. So the point that is made is that just like the body of King Vena was churned and it produced Bahuka and then Prithu Maharaj, we should also learn to churn our hearts in difficult times. So the Brahmanas churned the body of Vena using mantras. Initially, Nishad came and then Prithu and Archi appeared. Similarly, we should churn our consciousness with the chanting of the holy name and the association of devotees. What appears first? The anarthas. But if we persist and we follow the procedure, then the Lord with all his opulences, Shri, with his opulences will certainly appear. So I remember I once attended a Japa retreat by Sachidananda Swami. Gurujan Prabhu was also there. And when we were starting the 64 round day, then, or there were 364 round days. When we were starting the second one, then it began with the devotees sharing the realization of the previous day. And one of the common themes of the realization was people sharing that how unexpected thoughts were appearing in the mind. So this was in Tirthradam in Vrindavan. close to Vrindavan, in Tirkadam, where there's the ashram of Rupa Goswami. And in a very, very spiritually surcharged place, in the association of Vaishnavas, in the shelter of Sachidananda Maharaj, Bhurijan Prabhu, the devotees were chanting, and then they themselves were expressing surprise that we expected the chanting to be pure. But they were surprised that it was actually the opposite. And this was not just one devotee. Over and over devotees were sharing this. And then Sachidananda Maharaj gave this example that he gave this example that in our heart, there is a mountain of impious thoughts and activities because of our past lives. And when we chant, it's like a thunderbolt that is attacking that mountain over and over again and destroying it. But when it gets destroyed, then when a mountain is destroyed by a thunderbolt, then everywhere there is dust. So he said, this is what you're experiencing. So rather than being discouraged, you should be encouraged that the process is working. So when you're seeing these impious thoughts, this is the destruction of the kuta, the bij, the aprarabdha that is stored in your life for millions of lifetimes. And that the holy name is destroying like thunderbolts. But it also means that eventually the Lord will appear. So the sages in this case, they persisted. So when they saw Bahuka appearing, they did not become despondent, but they continued the process as per the recommended method. So they did not act whimsically, they did not become despondent, but with determination, with persistence, following established processes, chanting established mantras. And the result was from the very same body, different body part, but from the very same body, who appears? The personality of Godhead, along with his opulence. So I was hearing a lecture on this verse, and the speaker was making an interesting point, saying that the sages created a revolution by their action. And then he says, in any revolution, there are 4 stages. The first is to identify the cause of the disturbance. The second is to remove the bad things. The third is to give relief to the people. And the fourth is to increase the productivity. For instance, the revolution may start by somebody seeing that there is, a group of people seeing there is rampant corruption. So identify the cause of disturbance, too much corruption going on. The removal of bad things. The government is corrupt, so topple the government. Third is give relief to the person, which is now introduce a properly situated government. And the fourth is that results in improvement. Now everybody is happy. So how did the sages create a revolution? That they first identified the cause of the problem, King Vena. Then they removed him. They killed him. Third is that they rectified the situation by causing Maharaj Prithu to appear. So they introduced the proper process. And finally, they coronated him as the king. And the result was that The same kingdom that was troubled by so much, both under King Vena and after him, now became, or would become, they went through some initial trouble, but would become a ideal kingdom. We see the same revolution being enacted by Krishna when he killed Kamsa. Same thing he did. That he identified him as the cause, killed him, made Ugrasen the king, and then the Yadus were properly situated. Same thing Krishna did with the Kauravas. Same thing he did with Jarasandha. Same thing he did with Bhaumasura. The point that is made over here is that a successful revolution requires all these 4 stages. Now, this point is being made here, not for academic purposes, but for personal application. That one should go through all these 4 stages systematically. In the modern day and time, the problem with most of the revolution is that they do the first 2 stages and then they fail. So there was this famous Arab Springs that happened when in the Middle Eastern area, there were so many revolutions that happened. And it was all because of the corruption that was going on there. So a great part of the society, they revolted against the established rule, they removed the government, but there was no qualified person to take. So Syria is an example of it, that they're in a much worse situation now. Because while the first 2 things have been done, the last 2 things have not been done. So whereas first they had tyranny, now they have anarchy. They have the largest number of refugees that are going on. So in our lives also, we need to follow through all the 4 processes. We can identify that the cause of our unease is material attachment. We can remove that material attachment. But then it is important for us to introduce the proper process, which is get relief by reattaching ourselves to the spiritual aspects, to Krishna and the devotees. And the result would be then we would experience real happiness. The process of bhakti is famous because it creates this revolution in all the 4 stages. Those who are impersonalists, they only stop at the first 2 stages. They say that the problem with your existence is material attachment, correct? Remove material attachment, correct? But then they have nothing to replace it. So the tyranny gets replaced by anarchy. But bhakti is famous because it goes through all the 4 stages of the revolution. And as practitioners of this process, it is also important for us to follow through. Because while bhakti is a broad stroke, but we are dealing with the ongoing eradication of our anarthas. So we may identify an anartha in us, maybe pride. We may try and eradicate pride. But the important thing is that we follow through the other 2 stages also. So what does introducing the proper process mean? That we replace the pride that we have in ourselves with the pride that we have in being servants of Krishna and his devotees. And then we will experience the real results of the revolution. Okay, I'll do a couple of more verses and then pause for discussion. Verse 2. Tadrishva mithunam jatum Rishyu Brahmavadinaha Uchuhu Param Santushta Viditva Bhagvat Kalam. The great sages were highly learned in Vedic knowledge. When they saw the male and female born of the arms of King Vena, they were very pleased, for they could understand that the couple was an expansion of a plenary portion of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you can imagine now the conches are blowing, all auspiciousness is appearing. Why? Because the Lord has appeared with his eternal consort. Maharaj Prithu comes in the category of Shakti Veshavtar. So he is not Vishnu Tattva, he is Jiva Tattva, just like Vyasadeva, Narad Muni, but empowered with a particular potency. Narad Muni is empowered with Bhakti, Vyasadeva is empowered with Gyan, Parshuram is empowered with Daman Shakti, Maharaj Prithu is empowered with the Palan Shakti, that of taking care of Praja, or the ruling potency of the Lord. So just like Maharaj Prithu is a Shaktivesh avatar of Lord Vishnu, Archi is a Shaktivesh avatar of Lakshmi Devi. And of course, from our earlier study of Shaktivesh avatars, we know that sometimes Shaktivesh avatars are Vishnu Tattvas and sometimes they are Jiva Tattvas. In this case, Jiva Tattva. Prabhupada says in the purport that the method adopted by the great sages and scholars who were learned in Vedic knowledge was perfect. They removed all the reaction of King Vena's sinful activity by seeing that King Vena first gave birth to Bahuk, described in the previous chapter. After King Vena's body was thus purified, a male and female came out of it. And the great sage could understand that this was an expansion of Lord Vishnu. This expansion, of course, was not Vishnu Tattva, but a specifically empowered expansion of Lord Vishnu known as Avish. Verse 3. Vishya uchu yesha Vishnur Bhagavataha Kala Bhuvan Palini Iyam cha Lakshmiha Sambhuti Purushasya Napayini. The great sages said, the male is a plenary expansion of the power of Lord Vishnu, who maintains the entire universe. And the female is a plenary expansion of the goddess of fortune, who is never separated from the Lord. So Lakshmi Devi, one of Lakshmi Devi's name is Anupayini. So Anupayini means inseparable. So because Lakshmi Devi is always there with Lord Vishnu. Even when she is not there personified, she is there as the what's the name of the mark on the chest of Lord Vishnu?
Srivatsa.
Srivatsa. Thank you, Srivatsa. So even when she's not there physically, she's there as Srivatsa. That's why she's eternally residing on the chest of Lord Vishnu, and that's why she's called Anupayini. Srila Prabhupada also mentions that materialists, they try to separate Lakshmi Devi from Lord Vishnu. Ravan wanted to enjoy Sita Devi without Lord Ram. Similarly, the materialists in the current world, they want to enjoy wealth, but without surrendering to Lord Vishnu. So just like Raman, for his desire to enjoy Sita Devi without acknowledging her position as the consort of Lord Ram, he was killed. Prabhupada said, that's what happens to materialists. that when they try to enjoy the opulences, they are destroyed because of that. On the other hand, devotees, they simply serve Lord Vishnu. And when Lord Vishnu comes and resides in their house, then because Lakshmi Devi is a chaste wife, she never leaves the side of her husband. She's Annapayani. She also comes and eternally resides in the house of the Vaishnavas. So the Vaishnavas not only get the mercy of Lord Vishnu, but it's what is called a 2-for-1 deal. When Lord Vishnu comes, Lakshmi Devi comes. And Lakshmi Devi is all opulences. Prabhupada says that materialist follows the policy of Ravan, who wanted to separate Sita from Lord Ramachandra. The process of separation will vanquish him. Those who are very rich and have taken favor of the goddess of fortune in this world must engage their money in the service of the Lord. In this way, they can continue in their opulent position without disturbance. Prabhupada is giving a preaching tip over here, how to engage those who are wealthy in the service of the Lord. Okay, so let me pause over here and see what discussion we have.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just one comment and analogy that you said about the revolution in the heart. And so when you chant, then the anarthas come, the bad thought come. I think one of the examples they use that when in the heart there's a lot of dust, when you take a broom, you start to clean, the dust come up. The first thing is the dust will rise. That means, they were all like very, very settled well in the heart. When you disturb, then it becomes up. That's why the thought and the thing come. And if we persist, it will go away. We keep cleaning.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And the key is that just tolerate it. One should not get discouraged. Because it is true, once Prabhupada was sitting and a disciple was watching him, and then he came to Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, I don't know how these thoughts are coming in my mind. Prabhupada said, what thoughts? And he said that I have this thought that I want to take this and hit you on the head with it. And Prabhupada said, don't worry, it will go. So yes, it's a testimony to the fact that the process is working, but important thing is to persist. Yeah, Varshana is giving the example that when the ocean was churned, then first poison came and then nectar. A lot of other things, but that's the nature of material existence. So it's actually very encouraging to me because I had this challenge of that while I was chanting, my mind used to go places where it normally does not go. And after I finished chanting, my mind would be peaceful. It would be just like that. During that time, it was like an agitated monkey. And I mean, not that my chanting is potent, but to whatever it means that the process is working.
Which is something which is very funny, Prabhu. When you're thinking like, oh, I have to control my mind to hear the holy name, then you are thinking about techniques, how to not to remember things. But at the same time, when you're thinking about the technique, you're forgetting about the listening of the Maha Mantra. It's like a catch-22.
That's true. Okay, we have no more thoughts, then we'll pause here. We'll meet again Wednesday. Panchakalpita rupayascha kripa sindhu vyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanand. Hare Hare Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.